The smell of grilling burgers filled the Watson family's backyard as neighbors gathered for what had become a monthly tradition. I was helping Arthur carry folding chairs when I heard my wife's voice cutting through the afternoon conversations. Ladies, I've got the perfect solution for everyone," she announced loudly enough for half the neighborhood to hear. "Who wants to trade husbands? Mine's low maintenance, zero ambition, completely boring." The laughter that followed felt like ice water in my veins. I set down the chairs slowly, watching as she gestured toward me like I was some defective appliance she was trying to unload. "I'm serious," she continued, playing to her audience of neighborhood wives. "He comes home, sits on the couch, watches TV, and that's it. No drama, no surprises, no excitement whatsoever." That's when Alexis, our recently divorced neighbor from 2 houses down, stepped forward from where she'd been quietly sipping her wine. The conversations around us started dying down as she approached with that confident smile of hers. "I'll take him," she said simply, looking directly at my wife. Seriously, the shift in the group was immediate. What had been laughter at my expense suddenly became uncomfortable silence. My wife's confident smirk faltered for just a moment before she forced another laugh. "Oh, Alexis, you're so funny." "Am I?" Alexis tilted her head, her voice carrying that smooth tone she used when she wasn't joking around. "Low maintenance sounds perfect after what I've been through. Zero drama? Sign me up. And boring." She looked directly at me with an appraising look that made several people shift uncomfortably. "I seriously doubt that." My wife's face was starting to flush red, but she pushed forward. "Well, I mean, if you really want him. Should I text the movers now or tomorrow morning?" Alexis pulled out her phone with practiced ease, thumb hovering over the screen. "I can have them here by noon tomorrow. My place is better Wi-Fi anyway." The group erupted in nervous chatter. Some people laughed, but it wasn't the same easy laughter from before. This felt different, charged. My wife was looking around the group, clearly expecting support, but finding mostly surprised faces staring back at her. "You're not serious," my wife said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Try me," Alexis replied, still holding her phone. "I've got their number right here. Watson Moving Services. They moved me out of my ex's place in 3 hours flat." Arthur cleared his throat nearby. "Well, this got interesting fast. I found myself in the strangest position. For years, I'd endured these little public humiliations, these casual dismissals of who I am and what I bring to our marriage. But watching Alexis treat me like I was actually worth something, like I was a prize instead of a burden, something shifted inside me. "You know what?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe she should text them." The silence that followed was deafening. My wife's mouth actually fell open. Alexis raised an eyebrow and smiled in a way that suggested she was enjoying this immensely. "Don't encourage her," my wife snapped at me, but her voice cracked slightly. "Why not?" I stepped closer to where they were standing. "You just spent 5 minutes telling everyone how worthless I am as a husband." Alexis seems to disagree. "Maybe she sees something you don't." Alexis nodded approvingly. Smart and observant. "See, not boring at all." The neighborhood wives were now whispering among themselves, shooting glances between my wife and Alexis like they were watching a tennis match. My wife looked around desperately for support, but the dynamic had completely shifted. She'd made a critical error. She'd tried to embarrass me in front of everyone, but instead, she'd embarrassed herself. Because now everyone was seeing exactly how she talks about her husband, and they were watching another woman treat me with the respect she never did. "This isn't funny anymore," my wife said, but nobody was laughing. "No," I agreed, looking directly at her. "It's not." Alexis wasn't done. She looked at her phone screen, then back at my wife with that same calm confidence that had caught everyone's attention. "You know what? Let me just call them now," she said, starting to dial. "I hate leaving things unfinished." "Stop it, Alexis," my wife said, but there was panic creeping into her voice now. "This joke has gone far enough." "What joke?" Alexis paused her dialing and looked genuinely confused. "You offered to trade him." "I accepted." "You asked if anyone wanted him." "I said yes." "I'm just following through on your suggestion." The other neighbors were now openly staring. Kennedy from across the street had her hand over her mouth, trying not to laugh. Arthur was grinning like he was watching the best entertainment he'd seen all year. "I wasn't actually offering to trade my husband," my wife protested. "Then why did you say it?" I asked her directly. "Why did you stand here in front of everyone and talk about me like I'm some broken appliance you want to get rid of?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because what could she say? Everyone had heard her. Everyone had watched her spend 5 minutes running me down for laughs. Alexis put her phone away and stepped closer to my wife. You know, when I got divorced 6 months ago, I promised myself I'd never settle for a man who didn't appreciate me. But here you are, with a man who clearly does appreciate you, and you're out here trying to embarrass him for entertainment. I appreciate him, my wife said defensively. Do you? Alexis's voice was still friendly, but there was steel underneath it. Because appreciation doesn't usually sound like what I just heard. When I was married, my ex used to talk about me the same way. That's how I knew it was time to leave. The comparison hit my wife like a slap. Everyone knew Alexis's ex-husband had been a complete disaster. Cheating, lying, the whole mess. Being compared to him was not something my wife wanted to hear. That's completely different, my wife stammered. Is it? Alexis turned to address the group. Ladies, when you love and respect your husbands, do you stand at neighborhood gatherings and ask who wants to trade them because they're boring? The silence stretched out uncomfortably. None of the other wives were meeting my wife's eyes anymore. Georgia from next door finally spoke up. I mean, Eric drives me crazy sometimes, but I'd never. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. The message was clear. My wife was starting to realize she'd made a serious miscalculation. What she'd intended as harmless comedy at my expense had turned into a neighborhood-wide judgment of how she treats her marriage. Moving truck will be here at 10 tomorrow morning, Alexis announced, putting her phone back in her pocket. I already texted them. Hope that works for your schedule. You did not just text movers, my wife said, but her voice was shaking now. Alexis held up her phone, showing the sent message. Watson Moving Services. Ask for Henry. They're very efficient. The group of neighbors burst into a mixture of gasps and nervous laughter. This had gone from entertainment to genuine drama, and nobody quite knew how to handle it. Alexis, you can't be serious, my wife pleaded. Why not? You made the offer publicly. I accepted publicly. Your husband seems open to it. What's the problem? I found myself in the surreal position of watching two women essentially negotiate over me while the entire neighborhood watched. But what struck me most was the contrast. My wife had spent years making me feel like I was lucky anyone would put up with me. Alexis was acting like I was worth fighting for. The problem is he's my husband, my wife finally exploded. Then maybe you should act like it, Alexis replied calmly, instead of shopping him around to the neighbors. Arthur started a slow clap. Best barbecue entertainment we've had all year. This isn't entertainment, my wife snapped at him. You're right, I said, stepping forward. It's educational. I'm learning how other people see the way you talk about me. And I'm learning how it feels to have someone actually defend me instead of tear me down. My wife looked around the group desperately, but the damage was done. Every person there had witnessed her trying to humiliate me, and they'd watched me find someone who valued what she dismissed. The power dynamic had completely flipped, and we all knew it. The barbecue continued, but everything had changed. My wife retreated to a corner with two of her friends, shooting angry glances across the yard while they whispered furiously. Meanwhile, Alexis had somehow managed to insert herself into every conversation I was having. So what do you do for work? She asked as we stood by the grill with Arthur and a couple other neighbors. Software development for Snow Industries, I replied. Nothing too exciting. Are you kidding? That's fascinating. I've always wondered how all this technology actually works. You must be incredibly smart to understand all that. It was such a simple statement, but it hit me hard. When was the last time my wife had expressed genuine interest in my work, or called me smart? Usually I got eye rolls when I mentioned anything about my job. Arthur raised an eyebrow. He's being modest. His team just landed that big contract with the city's traffic management system. Whole thing's been in the papers. That was you. Alexis turned to me with obvious admiration. I read about that project. That's going to make driving through downtown so much better for everyone. I felt myself standing a little straighter. It was a team effort, but yeah, I designed most of the core algorithms. Brilliant and humble, Alexis said, giving me a look that was definitely not subtle. I'm liking this arrangement more and more. From across the yard, I could see my wife's face getting redder as she watched Alexis hang on every word I said. What made it worse was that other people were noticing too. Kennedy approached our group carrying a fresh drink. I had no idea you worked on that traffic project. That's actually really impressive. See, Alexis gestured toward Kennedy. Everyone appreciates what you do. Well, almost everyone. The dig was obvious, and Kennedy looked uncomfortable for a moment before changing the subject. But the message was clear. Alexis wasn't going to let anyone forget what my wife had said earlier. Owen from down the street joined us with his teenage son. "Hey, didn't you help my kid with his computer science homework a few months back? He's been talking about applying for programming internships because of that conversation." "Dad," he explained object-oriented programming in like 10 minutes when my teacher couldn't get it through to me in 3 weeks. The kid chimed in. "That was awesome." Alexis nodded approvingly. "Patient teacher, problem solver, community helper. This keeps getting better." I was starting to feel like I was seeing myself through new eyes. These weren't things my wife ever mentioned or seemed to notice. To her, I was just the guy who came home and sat on the couch. But here was Alexis, cataloging every positive thing anyone said about me. "You know what else?" Arthur said, warming to the theme. "Remember when the Johnson's tree fell during that storm last winter? Who showed up with a chainsaw at 7 in the morning to help clear their driveway?" "That would be my new roommate," Alexis said with a grin. "Dependable, helpful, prepared for emergencies." "Alexis, stop," I said, but I was smiling despite myself. "Stop what? Stop pointing out how great you are? Stop showing appreciation for the things you do? Stop treating you like you matter?" The question hung in the air, because that's exactly what she was doing, things my wife had stopped doing years ago. Camila from the end of the block appeared with a plate of desserts. "Are we talking about the neighborhood hero? This man fixed my garbage disposal last month and wouldn't even let me pay him. Skilled with his hands too," Alexis observed. "This is turning into quite the resume." I glanced across the yard to where my wife was standing. She was no longer whispering with her friends. She was staring directly at our group with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something closer to fear, because she was watching the entire neighborhood discover all the things about me that she'd either forgotten or chosen to ignore. She was watching another woman appreciate me publicly in ways she never had privately. And she was realizing that her little joke about trading husbands might not have been as funny as she thought. "You know what the best part is?" Alexis said, loud enough that her voice carried across the yard. "All this time I thought the good men in this neighborhood were already taken. Turns out one of them was just undervalued." The group around us laughed, but it wasn't mean-spirited laughter. It was the kind of laughter that happens when people recognize a truth they hadn't considered before. My wife heard it too, and from the look on her face, she finally understood exactly what she'd done to herself. The barbecue officially ended around 8, but the conversations continued in driveways and front yards as neighbors reluctantly headed home. I was helping Arthur stack chairs when I noticed the subtle dynamics playing out across the street. Kennedy and Giorgio were deep in conversation by Kennedy's mailbox, occasionally glancing toward our house. Owen was showing Alexis something on his phone, while his wife Shirley nodded along enthusiastically. Even the younger couples who usually kept to themselves were lingering, clearly discussing what they'd witnessed. My wife had disappeared inside our house 20 minutes earlier, claiming she had a headache. But through the kitchen window, I could see her pacing back and forth, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling her sister or one of her friends to complain about how everyone had ganged up on her. "Quite a show tonight," Arthur said as we finished with the chairs. "Haven't seen drama like that since the Hendersons moved away." "It wasn't supposed to be drama," I replied. "She was just trying to be funny." Arthur gave me a look. "Son, I've been married 43 years. That wasn't her trying to be funny. That was her trying to put you in your place in front of everyone. Problem is, it backfired spectacularly." Before I could respond, Alexis appeared at my elbow. She'd changed from her earlier sundress into jeans and a fitted t-shirt that somehow made her look even better. "Walk me home," she asked. "I want to show you the space I'm thinking of clearing out in my garage for your workshop tools." The request was innocent enough, but the implications weren't lost on anyone within earshot. Arthur grinned and headed inside, leaving us alone in the growing twilight. "You don't have to do this," I said as we started walking toward her house. "Do what?" "Walk home. I live 2 houses down. You know what I mean. The whole moving thing. The flirting. Making my wife uncomfortable." Alexis stopped walking and turned to face me. "Let me ask you something. How long has she been talking about you that way?" What? "The way she talked about you tonight. Like you're some burden she has to carry. Like you're lucky she puts up with you." I thought about it honestly. A few years, I guess. Maybe longer. "And how does that make you feel when she does it?" "Like garbage," I admitted. "Like I'm not worth anything." "Well, you are worth something. You're worth a lot, actually. And if she can't see that, maybe someone else should." We'd reached her front porch, and she sat down on the steps, patting the spot next to her. I hesitated for a moment, then sat down. I wasn't really kidding about the movers, she said quietly. I mean, I was escalating things to make a point, but the underlying offer? That was genuine. Alexis, hear me out. I've been divorced for 6 months. I spent 2 years in counseling trying to save a marriage to a man who cheated on me repeatedly and then told me it was my fault for not being exciting enough. Sound familiar? It did sound familiar. Not the cheating part, but the constant criticism, the feeling that nothing I did was ever quite good enough. When I finally left him, you know what I promised myself? That I'd never again settle for someone who didn't appreciate what I bring to the table. But more importantly, I'd never again overlook someone good just because they're not flashy or dramatic. She leaned back against the porch railing, studying my face in the dim light from her front door. You're not boring. You're stable. You're not lacking ambition. You're content. You're not low maintenance because you don't care. You're low maintenance because you're secure enough not to need constant validation. My wife doesn't see it that way. Your wife is an idiot, Alexis said bluntly. And I think deep down you know that. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my wife. Where are you? Get home now. Alexis glanced at my screen and raised an eyebrow. Demanding. Controlling. No please or thank you. She's upset. She's embarrassed. There's a difference. And instead of apologizing for humiliating you in front of the entire neighborhood, she's ordering you around. I stood up, but Alexis caught my hand. Think about something tonight, she said. Think about how it felt when people were saying nice things about you. When someone was defending you instead of tearing you down. When you were being appreciated instead of tolerated. Her hand was warm, and she didn't let go immediately. The movers really will be here at 10 tomorrow morning. I wasn't bluffing about that. But I want you to know it's not just about proving a point anymore. I genuinely think you deserve better than what you're getting at home. My phone buzzed again. Another text. I'm serious. Get home right now. I have to go, I said. I know. But remember what I said. You have options. You're not stuck just because she's decided you should be grateful for whatever scraps of respect she throws your way. I walked home in the darkness, processing everything that had happened. For the first time in years, someone had seen value in me that my wife apparently couldn't. Someone had stood up for me, flirted with me, made me feel like I was worth fighting for. The porch light was on at my house, and through the living room window, I could see my wife waiting. She was still on her phone, pacing again, gesturing angrily as she talked. I paused at the front door, key in hand. Tomorrow, according to Alexis, movers would show up at 10 in the morning. It had started as a joke, then escalated into a power play, but now it felt like something else entirely. It felt like a genuine choice I was going to have to make. Inside, my wife ended her phone call the moment I walked through the door. We need to talk, she said, and her tone suggested this conversation wasn't going to be pleasant. My wife was standing in the middle of our living room like she was preparing for battle. Her phone was face down on the coffee table, but I could see the recent call log still displayed. 3 calls to her sister, 2 to her best friend from work, and 1 to her mother. The full damage control campaign. Do you have any idea how humiliated I am right now? She began before I'd even closed the front door completely. Actually, I do. I replied, setting my keys down carefully. I felt that way at every neighborhood gathering for the past 3 years. This is different, and you know it. How is it different? Because tonight you were the target instead of me. She crossed her arms defensively. I was making conversation, being social. You just sat there and let that woman make a fool of me. I stared at her for a long moment. Let me get this straight. You publicly announced to our entire neighborhood that I'm worthless as a husband. Someone disagreed with your assessment and showed interest in me. And somehow I'm the one who made a fool of you. She was flirting with you right in front of me, in front of everyone. And how do you think it feels when you mock me right in front of everyone? When you talk about me like I'm some defective appliance you're stuck with? That's not what I was doing. That's exactly what you were doing. You asked who wanted to trade husbands because I'm boring, low maintenance, and have no ambition. You said it word for word. She faltered slightly, but pressed on. I was joking. Everyone knew I was joking. Alexis didn't think it was funny. Arthur didn't think it was funny. Kennedy and Georgia didn't think it was funny. In fact, the only person who thought it was hilarious was you. My wife began pacing again, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Alexis is a desperate divorced woman who's trying to steal someone else's husband. She's been eyeing you since she moved in here. Has she? Or have you just never noticed that other people might see something valuable in me that you've stopped appreciating? I appreciate you. When? When was the last time you told me you were proud of something I accomplished? When was the last time you defended me instead of tearing me down? When was the last time you treated me like someone you actually wanted to be married to? The questions hung in the air because we both knew she couldn't answer them. Instead, she switched tactics. I talked to my sister. She says I should call Alexis and tell her to back off. Woman to woman. Don't you dare. The firmness in my voice surprised both of us. I hadn't spoken to her that directly in years. Excuse me. I said don't. You created this situation. You opened this door when you decided to humiliate me publicly. You don't get to control how people respond to that. She's trying to break up our marriage. Our marriage was already broken. She just pointed it out in a way that everyone could see. My wife's face flushed red. How can you say that? We've been married for 8 years. 8 years of what? 8 years of you treating me like I'm lucky you settled for me? 8 years of you rolling your eyes when I talk about my work? 8 years of you making jokes at my expense every time we're around other people? I don't do that. Tonight alone, you told an entire backyard full of people that I have no ambition. I'm completely boring, and I'm so worthless as a husband that you'd trade me to anyone willing to take me. And when someone called you out on it, you got angry at me for not defending your right to insult me. She sat down hard on the couch, finally seeming to grasp that this conversation wasn't going the way she'd planned. What do you want me to do? Grovel? Apologize to the whole neighborhood. I want you to think about why Alexis's offer bothered you so much. Is it because you love me and don't want to lose me? Or is it because you don't want to lose the convenience of having me around while you treat me like I don't matter? That's not fair. Neither is 8 years of being taken for granted. My phone buzzed with a text message. We both looked at it automatically. It was from Alexis. Movers confirmed for 10 a.m. Sleep well. My wife's eyes went wide. She's actually serious about this. Apparently, you're not actually considering it. I picked up my phone and looked at the message for a long moment. You know what struck me most about tonight? It wasn't that Alexis was flirting with me. It was that when people started talking about the good things I do, she listened and appreciated them. When was the last time you did that? I listened to you. Do you? When Arthur mentioned the traffic project I've been working on for months, you looked bored. When Kennedy talked about how I helped Owen's kid with his homework, you checked your phone. When Camila mentioned that I fixed her garbage disposal, you started a conversation with someone else. She didn't have an answer because she knew I was right. But Alexis? She paid attention to every word. She asked questions. She acted like these were things to be proud of instead of things to tolerate. So what? You're just going to leave me for some woman you barely know? I'm going to consider whether I want to stay with someone who thinks so little of me that she advertises my flaws to the neighborhood for entertainment. My wife's phone rang. She glanced at it and declined the call. That was my mother. I told her what happened, and she wants to talk to you. What did you tell her? The truth. That Alexis Armstrong is trying to steal my husband, and you're not doing anything to stop it. Is that the truth? Or is the truth that you finally pushed me too far, and now you're dealing with the consequences? She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years. Maybe she was. The movers will be here at 10 tomorrow morning, I said quietly. I suggest you spend tonight thinking about whether you want to give me a reason to tell them they made the trip for nothing. I headed toward the stairs, leaving her sitting on the couch with her phone and her damage control calls. For the first time in our marriage, I was the one walking away from the argument, and it felt incredible. I woke up at 9:30 to the sound of my wife on the phone downstairs, her voice sharp and defensive. Through the bedroom window, I could see a white moving truck turning onto our street. Watson Moving Services. Right on schedule. I got dressed slowly, listening to fragments of my wife's conversation floating up from the kitchen. She was talking to someone about that manipulative woman and marriage counseling and working things out. The desperation in her voice was something I'd never heard before. At exactly 10 o'clock, there was a knock on our front door. I walked downstairs to find my wife frozen in the hallway, still holding her phone. Through the glass panel beside the door, we could both see 2 men in matching gray uniforms standing on our porch. You don't have to answer it, she whispered. But I was already reaching for the door handle. Morning, said the older of the 2 men. Henry Sutton from Watson Moving Services. We're here for the Armstrong relocation. Behind him, I could see Alexis walking across her front yard toward us. She was wearing a sundress that perfectly complemented her figure. and she moved with that same confident grace that had caught everyone's attention last night. My wife stepped up beside me. "There's been a mistake. Nobody's moving anywhere." Henry checked his clipboard. "Ma'am, we have a confirmed appointment for 10 a.m. Loading household goods for transport to 847 Maple Street." He gestured toward Alexis's house. "That's correct," Alexis said as she reached our porch. She looked directly at me. "Are you ready?" The question hung in the air. My wife grabbed my arm. "Don't do this," she said. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll change. Will you?" I asked her. "Or will you just be more careful about where you humiliate me?" I made a mistake. One mistake. It wasn't one mistake. It was 8 years of mistakes. Last night was just the first time someone called you out on it. Alexis stepped closer. "The offer stands exactly as I made it. You're valued, you're appreciated, and you're wanted. No conditions, no probation period, no promises to change who I am." I looked at my wife. Even now, faced with losing me, she couldn't bring herself to admit that the problem was how she'd been treating me. It was counseling, or changing, or working things out. Anything except acknowledging that she'd spent years making me feel worthless. "I'm sorry," I said to her, "but I'm not going to spend another 8 years proving to you that I'm worth basic respect." I turned to Henry. "Give me 10 minutes to pack a bag. Everything else can wait until later." My wife's face went white. "You're serious? You're actually leaving me for her?" "I'm leaving you for me," I corrected. Alexis just reminded me that I deserved better than what I was getting. As I headed upstairs to pack, I could hear my wife starting to cry. But it wasn't the kind of crying that comes from losing someone you love. It was the crying that comes from realizing you'd been taking something for granted until it was gone. 15 minutes later, I was walking across the street with a suitcase in one hand and Alexis's hand in the other. Behind us, the moving truck sat in our driveway like a promise kept. The entire neighborhood was watching from windows and porches. Arthur gave me a thumbs up from his front yard. Kennedy waved from her kitchen window. Owen's teenage son actually applauded. My wife stood in our doorway, still holding her phone, watching me walk away from 8 years of marriage to a woman who'd never learned to appreciate what she had. 3 months later, the house went up for sale. My wife moved back in with her mother while she figured things out. The neighborhood gossip network kept me updated on her various attempts at damage control, claiming I'd had a midlife crisis, that Alexis had seduced me, that men just can't handle strong women. But the neighbors had been there. They'd heard exactly what she said and how she said it. They'd watched her try to humiliate me and seen how it backfired. No amount of revisionist history could change what everyone had witnessed. Alexis and I moved into a larger house 2 neighborhoods over. She kept her promise about appreciating what she had. Every day, she treated me like someone worth having, not someone she was stuck with. My ex-wife ran into us at a restaurant 6 months after the divorce was finalized. She approached our table with what looked like a prepared speech about mistakes and second chances. "I just want you to know I've changed," she said. "I've been in therapy. I understand what went wrong." I looked at her calmly. "I'm glad you're working on yourself. But understanding what went wrong doesn't undo 8 years of damage. So that's it. You're not even willing to try. I tried for 8 years. You had 8 years to treat me with respect and chose not to. I'm not giving you year 9. She looked at Alexis with obvious resentment. "I hope you're happy." "I am," Alexis replied simply. "Every single day." After my ex-wife left, Alexis reached across the table and took my hand. "Any regrets?" she asked. I thought about the barbecue that changed everything. About the moment someone finally stood up for me instead of tearing me down. About walking away from a marriage where I was tolerated instead of treasured. "Just one," I said. "What's that?" "I wish I'd had the courage to leave sooner." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "Well, you're here now, and that's what matters." She was right. I was exactly where I belonged, with someone who saw my worth instead of my flaws. Someone who would never stand in front of a crowd and ask who wanted to trade me. Because the best trade I ever made was trading a woman who didn't appreciate me for one who did.